When I came back to the division just a few days ago, the first thing that I did was look into my stash to see what kind of items I had and what I still needed to get in preparation for the next patch. And although I really can't complain about my exquisite collection of items that I had gathered since the 1.5 patch, I couldn't help but feel that I was still a little bit low on resources, such as the crafting materials. I know that blueprints for weapon mods, gear mods, and especially for weapons are still the #1 way to get a god rolled item, if you actually happen to own the blueprint for what you're looking for. But to grind out all those materials, that can take a lot of time. I mean, I have a lot of credits. Credits are pretty easy to come by, but to use all those credits to buy weapons and then deconstruct those weapons to get crafting materials, the weapons in the shop are just a little bit too expensive for that. Doing that is just called wasting your money and is not really efficient at all. Or is it? You might remember that back in patch 1.4, when world tiers were announced for the very first time, players could drop down to lower world tiers to buy cheaper, lower gear score items from the vendors, which you could then deconstruct to get a lot of crafting materials for relatively very little money. Massive quickly patched this out by scaling the vendors to sell items based on the gear score that you have and of all the gear combined in your backpack and in your stash, so that players wouldn't be able to do that anymore. But what if I told you that you can still buy cheap and low gear score items from vendors to stock up on crafting materials? And in this video, I'm going to show you how to do just that. Let's begin. Before we start off, I want you to know that you will need at least a few extra characters to do this. This is because, as I said, the items that the vendors sell scale based off of the highest gear score of all your gear combined. And in order to have them sell the lower gear score items, we essentially have to trick the game into thinking that you are a fresh level 30 player. A player that doesn't have any gear at all. And we can only do that by moving all the items that you own into the backpacks of your second, third, or even your fourth character. Space-wise, this shouldn't be a huge problem because every level 30 backpack and above can carry up to 110 items since patch 1.6.1. But the thing is, your characters still have to be at least level 30 to equip such a backpack in the first place. So there's that, just make sure you have a couple of characters that are already level 30. Second up, you will also need to get some really bad gear. I got my gear from some level 1 and some level 2 trash items that one of my characters still had from when I created it, but if you have no low level gear anywhere, and if you already have 4 characters which are already all maxed out, the way that you can get bad gear is by dropping down to World Tier 1 and farming some blue and purple items there until your gear score is below 163. Once your character is decked out in trash gear, move everything that you have in your inventory to your stash, and then, as I said, everything that you have in your stash to your other characters, so that when you log in with your main character, your gear score is below 163, your inventory is completely empty, apart from, of course, the stuff that you have equipped, and your stash is also completely empty. All that you have to do from that point on is simply switch to World Tier 1 and voila! All the vendors will now sell you 163 gear score items for a very cheap price, all things considered. All that's left now is to hurry over to one of the vendors, I usually go to the ones in the base, and buy all the same items over and over again and mass deconstruct them for very easy crafting materials. Admittedly, if you really want to bank materials the way that I want to do it, where I get everything at least in the 800 to 900 range, you'll still be spending tens of millions of credits, but those tens of millions of credits is usually just a couple days worth of farming, whereas getting 900 electronics, something like that, can literally take you forever to get. This is just a very fast and a very efficient way to exchange cash for some crafting materials, and I know that just like me, a lot of players still playing have a ton of cash, but can be very short on those crafting materials, especially if you're still looking for those god-rolled weapon mods or that god-rolled SVD. One more thing that I'd like to add is that this trick can also be used to get yourself some lower gear score weapons, where the main stat talent requirements are a lot lower. Everything at these vendors is exactly the same as with the vendors in World Tier 5 with your normal gear. They sell the same type of weapons each week with the same talents on it. The only difference is that of course the gear score is lower, so the base damage is also lower. But if you don't really care about the base damage that much, then this is the place to get those special guns. The one thing that you have to keep in mind though is that when you're playing a last stand game, all the gear that you have will be skilled up to gear score 256, meaning that the talents that you have on your weapons, they might be locked again if you do not meet the requirements for the 256 variant. As you might be able to tell, there are plenty of uses for this trick that can help you with all sorts of builds and all sorts of things. So to sum it up, step 1, equip yourself with shit gear until your gear score is below 163. Step 2, move all the items that you have in your inventory and in your stash to different characters. And step 3, once your inventory and your stash are completely empty, lower your world tier to world tier 1 and go to any random vendor to buy gear score 163 items. And then of course just deconstruct those items for easy crafting materials. And that's it. If you have any questions or something's not working, then you can always hit me up in the comments down below. And as always, I will see you guys later, or like they say in the Netherlands, zie je later.